Hello, everyone. This is NLP Radio on stream.
Hello. Hello.
Alexander Gerasimov is in our studio. I'm always happy to introduce this guest to you. It's a famous negotiator in Russia, an NLP trainer, NLP practitioner, NLP master trainings, geography of training sessions and seminars led by Alexander is 22 countries and 70 cities. And me, Olga Sarkisova, I'm a radio NLP presenter and a linguist. Today, we continue discussing Metaprograms. Last time we discussed motivation to and from. Alexander got us very interested in Metaprograms. And today we continue talking it over. Today we'll discuss reflexive type of people and active. Would you introduce it, Alexander? What is this?
Это определенные черты нашего характера.
Those are our certain character traits. As you know, there are people who cannot sit idle. They're superactive, proactive, and so on, who first do something and then think about it. And there are people who first think, measure twice, cut once. There is such a proverb, meaning that such people first weigh everything, calculate everything, and only then, slowly but steadily, they commence, for example, achieving a goal.
We didn't know that this is called Metaprograms. Okay, so how do we identify it in people, actually? We're watching them, we observe them, of course, but are there any tests to understand it?
В отличие от метапрограммы,
Unlike the From Towards Metaprogram we discussed in our previous podcast, everything is a little bit simpler in this case, more noticeable. A person having active metaprogram literally cannot sit idle. Such person starts talking even before you have finished. They can easily interrupt you when you speak. For example, such person types messages faster. For example, you have just sent a message to such a person, and they have immediately replied. Such person, as soon as a decision is made, jumps up and starts implementing it, or even starts doing something before a final decision is made. I often see this picture at trainings when I explain an exercise. There are people who immediately jump up and commence doing it, and there are reflective people. It is critical to them to ask all questions, to take everything possible into consideration, to think, to look around, to weigh everything, sometimes to note down, to take into account some other nuances, to ask questions once again and again, and keep sitting, contemplating, discussing. Not that it's critical to them to avoid doing something, they also do, but they need certain preparation. When they do something, they do it one step at a time.
Okay. Extremes meet often. There is such a proverb. Very interesting to find out what makes people such. What kind of circumstances make us active or reflexive? What should happen in the childhood that a child grows up reflexive or active?
в данном случае в детстве влияет как раз
In this case, in early childhood, the parenting style plays a significant role. Basically, all children are rather active. You can see that, for example, observing children playing outdoors at a kindergarten, where they're permanently moving somewhere, doing something, but you surely can imagine how a kid is gradually growing up, and he or she is told, "Where are you constantly hasting to? Why are you always gasping everything? Sit and think it over, calculate." And it gradually gets integrated, and if a family is, for example, accustomed to slow, heart-to-heart talks, some philosophical speculations, or parents' occupations are not related to physical activities, subsequently such person starts slowing down, realizing that thinking is more beneficial. Besides, it often happens that a person, their proactiveness is to their detriment. For example, a person makes a decision unthinkingly, for example, with regard to investments. If we're talking about adults, runs somewhere, writes something or says something and then gets punished for that and gets feedback as follows: if you were not in so much of a hurry, and if you had calculated and weighed everything, that wouldn't happen. I think many of us got this in their childhood. And later, in a similar situation, it really is an imprint. In a similar situation, such person asks him or herself, "Why am I in a hurry?" and comes to a conclusion: I'd better take everything into consideration. I'd better listen to experts' opinion. I'd better think about potential results. And gradually such person begins to slow down. But it is also critical to keep in mind that basically the context matters. Because, for example, a person may be rather active while communicating with their friends and reflective, for example, at work, dealing with customers.
It's surprising what you have said, because I thought that physiology is very strong. I thought that physiology is stronger than upbringing of our parents. And I actually thought that it was impossible to slow down human nature.
Да, конечно.
Yes, sure. Parents feel comfortable and their child has the same rhythm of life as they do. But not all parents are able to slow down a person, to slow down their child to their level. I'd like to add that. Yes, indeed, we understand that our environment has a strong influence on us. For example, a person leaves the country and moves to a noisy and quick city. It is an external factor, and then a person has to make a difficult choice, either to adapt to the crazy rhythm of the city, or having failed to get back. Well, surely there are some optimal intermediate variants, something else. It is an extreme example. I notice, based on my own experience, I travel a lot. When I, with my already integrated proactiveness, arrive in a small town and begin to list something off pretty rapidly, to talk about something I feel and see, judging by a person's reaction that I'd better pause between words, or slow down sometimes, or ask them if everything is clear to them. For example, and I understand that if I stay at that town, for example, for a week, I will slow down, and I will then need to adapt to the rhythm of the city when I am back to Moscow. So circumstances do have effect. So the older we get, the more flexible we are, and the easier we can adapt. While you have to make rather serious efforts to calm down a kid, and parents sometimes fail to do it. An older person has a more conscious attitude and understands that. Well, let us ask those driving a car a question. Imagine a traffic flow moving at a certain pace. It doesn't matter, 40 kilometers per hour or 20. If it is a traffic jam, or 90 kilometers per hour out in the country. So, at what speed should you drive your car? The answer is at the speed of the traffic flow. And there is no, if you drive faster, there are certain requirements for your driving. If you drive slower, you will hear horns sounding, and other drivers will be cutting in front of you. It may happen.
Okay. I believe that each type of, how do we call it, not filters, but These meta programs, active and reflexive, how else can we call it? How can we paraphrase it? What are these? Not filters, but characteristics. What are these?
Ну, это частичные и фильтры восприятия тоже.
Well, those are partially perceptual filters too, because when we are delivered information, we perceive things. Another example related to driving. For example, there is a person who is driving at a maximum speed of 40 kilometers per hour. For example, an old man. So it is his perceptual filter. He is processing information at this speed.
I think those are type of reactions. I think I have found a better word.
В том
Type
числе.
of reacting.
Including and there is a Formula One driver who is driving at the speed of 200 kilometers per hour, and it seems to him that everything is happening very slowly, and including his, it is often correlated. If a person perceives information quickly, they deliver information quickly as well. We just notice only performance, what a person delivers, but not how he or she perceives. Although, if you, for example, are telling something to somebody, you can easily notice how that person will try to interrupt you, saying, "Well, it's clear, what's next?" Or a reflective person who will say, a little bit slower, my horse is a little bit slower.
Or let me think. The favorite phrase, let me think.
Ну и согласитесь тоже, что даже быстро принимающий решение человек...
You must admit that a person who makes decision quickly can be slow in certain contexts, because it's experience outcome. It is one thing to buy, so to speak, a spontaneous purchase at a cashier desk, a chewing gum, but quite another to buy an apartment or a car. You don't need to make a decision quickly. You must think it over and weigh everything in this case. There is, to a certain extent, dependence on the context, and even an active person understands that they have to become reflective.
According to the context. I think that each of those types of reactions, now we know how to put it, each of them has a great power inside. So in some contexts, being active is a great plus. In some contexts, being reflexive. So probably for our listeners would be interesting to brainstorm. What are the best contexts for reflection and the best contexts for active reactions? Not in professions only. In which context of our life?
Я думаю, каждый должен определить это.
I think everyone must determine it for themselves independently. There are pluses. For example, you are building relationships with another person. It may be, for example, a first or a second date.
I think for our listeners now, you are becoming very attentive. So listen attentively to this part.
И человек, допустим,
And, for example, that person is very slow, and you realize that you won't be able to like such a person, that you won't be able to be with him or her. I think some of you, when you watch YouTube videos, there are speakers whom you are not able to listen to at their natural speech rate. Playback speed 1, and you set playback speed to 1.5 or 1.25x. For example, I listened to Mr. Wasserman. He's a very clever man. He has his own YouTube channel. I'm not able to listen to him even at 125. I set playback speed to 1.50. And then he's talking at my habitual speech rate.
I often do that.
это не хорошо и не...
It is neither good nor bad.
Это его там...
It is his individual rhythm.
Также с некоторыми
The same is true to some contexts. For example, but you must admit that there are both active and reflective approaches within the same context. A simple example. a game, for example, chess. There are fast chess and standard chess. There are some types of interaction when you have to be fast. For example, a fast food restaurant, for example, McDonald's. You won't visit a McDonald's restaurant with your friends just to spend some time and to talk. Everything there is designed for you could buy everything as fast as possible, eat it as fast as possible, and leave the restaurant as fast as possible, making way for another customer. And, for example, another sort of restaurants where everything is deliberately slowed down. Slow music, quite slow waiters, you have to wait for your order to be delivered. First, they offer you some wine. Or, for example, a restaurant which you visit in order to communicate with somebody, where nobody is in a hurry. Slow music is sounding, it takes a laid-back waiter some time to fulfill your order. And everything is for reflection, including for allowing a person to adopt and to understand that in almost every context there are pros and cons, both of being active and reflective.
An interesting question for our listeners about relationship. You have started talking about relationship and didn't ended up. For example, one person is active in 80% of cases, proactive. Another one is more reflexive. What will be efficient for a couple? To be both reflexive and to feel comfortable like this, to be both active, or to be different? What's going to be the most efficient for a couple?
By my reckoning, the best way is to match the rhythm of life of a person. Instead of the best way is to be yourself and to seek anyone who is the likes of you as much as possible. For long-term relationships. For short-term relationships, it could be attractive. I mean, those differences, the difference. But if you are with somebody for a long time, it is not necessarily about the active reflective metaprogram. It is about another one, too. It is a matter of probably your goals. Either such person complements you, but you realize that the difference will eventually become increasingly more significant. And for example, if you, the simplest example, a young woman who is getting ready to go somewhere, and a young man who has already got ready, in the future, this nice habit of her or of him will be able to kill another partner's feelings. It's not about me or something. It's rather about, well, at first it seems to be cool, because it differs from you, from your casual environment. And quite naturally, it attracts you. Well, eventually one gets accustomed. Therefore, I stand not for complimenting or for being a rapper. I stand for being different and feeling comfortable at the same time, playing different roles.
That was a surprising viewpoint. Okay. So you consider that for a long-term relationship, it would be ideal if the couple, each partner in the couple, get the same metaprograms, right? For a long-term relationship.
If you like somebody, we can consider a variant, not changing or adjusting a metaprogram.
Yeah, for a stable system, for a system for a long time, what is the best? For a healthy, stable system?
I think that the more similar, the easier it is in the long-term prospect.
So similarities. It's better to have a sameness, similarities, rather than differences. Okay, dear listeners, write in the commentaries, please, with your husbands and wives. What are your metaprograms and how do your family systems work? That's going to be interesting. Okay, the question a little more global than just active and reflexive. I have heard such a term as meta profile. Alexander, what is meta profile in general?
Метапрограммный
A
профиль
metaprogram profile is a general description of a person, of all metaprograms of a person that you know. You can compile the metaprogram profile of a person observing them, listening how they speak, observing their behavior in certain contexts. It is a list of all metaprograms.
Like a portrait of a personality.
Rather a psychological portrait of a person, and understanding of what a person can do. Based on a metaprogram profile, you can preliminarily determine an area where they can be delegated to, toward which occupation they have inclination, how to build relationships with them, or partnership in principle in the future, what you can expect from them and what you cannot. A metaprogram profile is a sort of cross-section, so to speak, of a person's current psychological state. We understand that a metaprogram profile can change eventually. I suggest that we should take into consideration, first, a current state of a person, and second, in relation to a certain context. An example for the previous podcast. From a previous podcast, a supervisor, a director, compiling metaprogram profiles of his employees, and then he understands that certain person shouldn't be a sales assistant or not a front-end sales assistant, but rather back-end sales assistant. Not who is making an initial contact with the customer, but who is leading because he or she is more reflective, unlike an active sales assistant who is calling to potential customers.
Right. You said it can be changed. How much can it be changed? Radically or just a little corrected? How much is it possible to change meta profile?
I suggest that we should change not a metaprogram profile, but a certain metaprogram. In this case, I wouldn't speak about changing or replacing a metaprogram.
Percentage? To change
Я предлагаю
percentage?
просто растягивать.
I propose to extend metaprograms. For example, you notice that a person is too active, excessively active, constantly active, and everywhere active. And it is recommended that some reflectiveness should be added to such a person deliberately, for example, through slowing down their breathing or through asking themselves some questions before making a decision, or through slowing down their speech rate, and a person will gradually become able to find advantages in such slowing down. Maybe such person will become more sensitive, maybe more observant, maybe they will begin to derive more pleasure for a certain context. And eventually such person will be not only active but also a little bit slow, and it can be gradually extended. Performing such extension, we may encounter some events in the past which have formed a person as he or she is imprints. And for example, a person trying to develop reflectiveness in them suddenly recalls a situation when they were, for example, reflective, and that led to stress, while he was or she was considering whether or not he or she should be dating with a girl or a boy. At school and more active, for example, rivals told her, and he then decided for himself, don't think, act. Don't think, act. And made it his life motto. He moved to a quicker city, found a quicker job, and his environment already doesn't allow him to slow down, although it seems he could, working on it. We can gradually expand our worldview and develop ourselves in terms of psychology.
Okay, can you say on your own example that your meta program, some of them maybe, has changed throughout all your life? Which one?
I surely can say that I'm currently becoming more reflective rather than active, but rather through increasing the number of details. Earlier it was ahead, faster, but now details and nuances are more important to me.
Okay. As for my example, I can say that I used to be totally active in taking decisions. Right now, this period of time between reaction and decision making is getting longer and longer. The older I become, the longer it gets. That's for sure.
Опять же, есть привязка к
Once
контексту.
again, there is dependence on the context. I can be quite active in a certain context. When I'm holding training, I become active very easily. While having rest, or a break, or something else, I, on the contrary, slow down intentionally.
Right. Maybe to ask our listeners to write in the commentaries what type of reaction have you noticed in yourself, and in which way does it help you, and in which way is it standing on your way and bothers you in life. That would be interesting to discuss. And I think that we are saying goodbye for today. Thank you, Alexander, for Metaprograms. Hear you in the next podcast.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.